The moment a stranger said the way he described my wedding ring, I understood my husband wasn't just a man. He was a riddle disguised as safety. I was at the grocery store, holding a bag of apples that felt heavier than usual, as if life itself were warning me that something was about to slip out of my hands. The cold air from the AC brushed my face, but the chill I felt didn't come from the temperature. It came from the exhaustion of someone who has spent years swallowing small, quiet lonelinesses. That's when I felt a finger barely touch my wrist. A strange touch, unexpected, intimate in a way no stranger should ever be. I turned my head slowly and saw a woman staring straight at my hand. But it wasn't admiration, it was recognition. The kind of recognition that only exists when there's a history behind it. She didn't smile. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to be polite. She just murmured, in a voice way too low to be a coincidence, "He picked that ring because he said the gold matched your calm nature, didn't he?" The bag slipped from my hand. The apples rolled all over the floor, bumping into each other, making a dull sound that echoed inside me like some kind of divine warning. The truth has arrived. My whole body froze. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was pushing the air out of my lungs. Because no one, absolutely no one, knew that sentence. It was the kind of intimate detail only two people could possibly know. Me and my husband. But that woman knew. I tried to keep my composure, the way all of us learn to do when the world threatens to collapse in public. I bent down to pick up the apples, but my hands were shaking so badly they slipped through my fingers. That was when her expression changed. It wasn't sudden, it slid, like her face dropped one emotional tone, from curiosity to pity. And pity is something we only feel for someone who's about to suffer. She took a deep breath, like someone about to cross an invisible line. "I didn't want to hurt you, but you need to see this." She opened her purse and pulled out a white envelope, the edges crumpled. I could smell the paper, that dry smell of something old, kept hidden for far too long. She placed the envelope in my hands like she was handing me something fragile and dangerous at the same time. When I opened it, I found a receipt. Just a simple receipt. But my world didn't fall apart because of the receipt. It fell apart because of the signature. The handwriting was his. The little flourish at the end was his. The line trailing down was his. But the name? The name wasn't. It was another, a strange name, familiar, forbidden. I looked at her breathless. She held my gaze like someone who knows they're about to watch another person wake up from a dream that lasted far too long. He used that name with me. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were full of a truth she seemed to have carried for years. I felt the whole aisle around me disappear. Every sound from the store faded, like I was underwater, hearing the world only halfway. And then she finished, almost in a whisper, right before handing me over to the storm. Living with him was like living in a hallway full of doors, and you've just realized they were all locked, haven't you? I couldn't answer, because that was exactly it. That sentence cut through my soul with the precision of someone who had already lived in the same dark place I was just now stepping into. And before I could ask who she was, she placed a hand on my shoulder, light, human, sad, and said, "He's not who you think he is, and I'm truly sorry." Then she walked away, disappearing between the shelves like a ghost that had just finished its task. I stayed there, holding the receipt, listening to my own heart telling me a truth I had never wanted to admit. My husband had another life, and I was just one of the locked doors in it. And in that instant, I knew the worst was still coming. This was only the first thread pulled from the knot he'd hidden from me. A thread that, if I kept pulling, would unravel the life I had built believing in a man who maybe never existed. The drive home that day felt like moving through a bad dream. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. The steering wheel was cold in my hands, the faint smell of apples mixed with the dry scent of the envelope, and a deep ache in my chest that didn't come from sadness, but from warning. I wasn't sure if I was taking deep breaths or just trying not to fall apart before getting home. When I pulled into the garage, my legs felt weak. The afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen window and lit up the chair where he always sat, the same spot that had been my place of rest for years, and, without me noticing, my place of emotional surveillance, too. I set the groceries on the counter and hid the envelope deep inside my purse with a speed I didn't know I had. I almost felt guilty, as if I were the one committing a crime. But something inside me whispered that the crime wasn't mine. It was his, and I was only beginning to see it. I made dinner like I did every day: fluffy white rice, buttered vegetables, golden chicken. The familiar smell filled the air, but it felt like it belonged to a different house, a different life. It was strange how suddenly everything felt like a stage set. Every movement I made felt like acting for a man who maybe never really belonged to me. When he arrived, I heard the key turn in the lock. A sound that for years brought me relief. He's home, everything's fine. Now sounded like a warning. He walked in, hung his coat with his usual precise movements, and kissed my forehead. A light kiss, almost procedural, something I used to call affection. This time, all I felt was distance, a calculated distance. "Smells good," he said, tossing his phone on the couch. I gave him a short smile. Forcing words out of my mouth felt impossible. We sat down to dinner. The table was small, simple, marked by time. A wine stain that never faded, a scratch from some careless moment. Things I once saw as part of our story. But that night, every detail screamed that there were always two versions of our story, the one I lived and the one he told. He held his fork with tension. I had always noticed that, but I never understood it. The fork held as if it could slip away. His other hand braced against the plate too firmly. A small gesture, but full of strain. That night, I understood it wasn't exhaustion. It was fear. Fear of anything he couldn't control. Silence grew between us, filling the space like smoke. He avoided my eyes. Every time I looked at him, I saw only the top of his head as he stared at his plate, as if looking at me were dangerous. And I realized, this silence wasn't new. This silence was constructed. He had been using it for years to avoid conversations that might brush against his real life. I always thought he was private. Now I understood. He was strategic. "Rough day?" I asked, trying to rescue some sense of normalcy. He nodded without raising his head. "Meetings, problems at work, nothing major." Nothing major? Not for him. For me, any detail of that night could be everything. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to ask, who is the man on that receipt? But my mouth couldn't find courage, and my heart needed more puzzle pieces before facing the picture. That's when I noticed something that had always been there. Whenever I mentioned family, the past, documents, he deflected. Not harshly, not rudely, but like someone who carefully avoids a road he knows too well and knows is dangerous. I tested it. "I was thinking the other day about your childhood. You never talk much about it." His hand holding the knife froze for a second, just 1 second, but enough for me to see. He lifted his eyes slowly. "Why bring that up? The past is the past." I gave a faint smile, holding my emotions like someone holding water in their hands. Just curious. He went back to eating, but his jaw worked harder than before. The silence returned. Not the silence of tiredness, but the silence of defense. The kind of silence that hides things. My heart tightened, not from sadness, from clarity. After dinner, I cleared the dishes. Warm water ran over the plates, creating a thin mist that rose toward my face. The sound of the faucet gave me time to think. I remembered the car paperwork, the odd signature, his irritation that day, the trips full of vague details, the locked document cabinet, the way he always avoided hospitals, and all of it aligned with the receipt hidden inside my purse. "Selena," he called from the living room. I turned slowly. He stood in the doorway holding a glass of water, wearing that expression that looks neutral but analyzes every inch of your face. "You seem distant." For a moment, I felt like telling the truth. But truth needed to be complete before it could be spoken. "Just tired." He nodded, but something in his expression shifted. A slight tightening around the eyes, a small movement in his lips. He was suspicious. And that made everything worse. Suspicion from him meant surveillance, and surveillance from someone like him is never gentle. He went back to the couch. I stood there holding a wet plate, watching the water dripping down my fingers like my own fear dripping slowly. It would be easier to exaggerate, easier to ignore, easier to cling to the story he had told me for years. But nothing in my body, not my instincts, not my breath, not my soul, told me I was exaggerating. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And for the first time, I allowed that truth to settle inside me without asking permission. It was then I realized something that changed everything. He wasn't hiding a mistake. He was hiding a life. And I was about to step into it, even if it shattered me. After that silent dinner, I spent the next day feeling like my own house had changed its scent. As if every corner were holding a fragment of a story I never knew existed. The morning light came through the window, but it carried a cold, sharp clarity that made everything look more exposed than I wanted. I opened the living room curtains, and that's when I saw it, under the console table. A brown envelope. It wasn't mine. I knew what belonged to me in that house. All of us know exactly where we keep the few things that are truly ours. And that envelope, it wasn't mine. My heartbeat quickened, but my fingers touched the envelope with the calm of someone who already suspects their own pain. The edges were worn, covered in a thin layer of dust, as if it had been shoved there quickly, almost hidden, but not well enough. I sat on the floor, legs folded, the envelope warm in my hands despite its cold paper. I opened it slowly, afraid of the sound it would make tearing open. And then the photos slipped out like blades. The first photo stole the air from my lungs. It was Desmond. Younger, maybe 10 years younger. His smile wasn't the controlled smile I knew. It was whole, alive, free. A smile I had never seen in my presence. A smile that wasn't mine. Beside him stood a woman. Dark hair, steady expression. She didn't look like a fling. She looked like part of him, truly. My chest tightened, but I kept looking. The next photo slid onto my lap. A boy. Curly hair, soft eyes. 5 or 6 years old at most. And on the left side of his face, a birthmark. Small, round, identical to Desmond's nephew. My hands went cold, even though sunlight was warming the carpet. I flipped the photo, a date on the back, 8 years ago. Exactly when he said he traveled for work all the time. The same years he came home exhausted, with a smell of highways on his clothes, but stories that never aligned. I picked up another photo and another. It was a family, not an affair. Not a moment of weakness, not some impulsive detour. It was another life, his life, and I had never been in it. My heart pounded so hard I heard it, a dull drum inside my ears. I kept going until one photo fell face down. When I turned it over, there was a simple house, a yard full of leaves, a bike leaning against the wall, a crooked swing in the corner, and on the far edge of the frame, his shoulder, carrying boxes, like someone who's moving, someone who's running. I searched for the date, 15 years ago, the exact month he showed up in my town. My vision blurred, the floor tilted for a moment. I grabbed another photo, and another, and another, all of them forming a mosaic I had never asked to see. Each image was a window into a past he didn't hide because it hurt. He hid it because it didn't fit the new life he built with me. And suddenly, everything that once felt odd, the absences, the vague stories, the way he dodged simple questions, all of it sharpened. Collapsed bond theory. I had read that term once, barely paying attention. Now it made sense. People who sever entire lives to build new ones from scratch. People who wipe their past like a chalkboard. People who leave behind names, homes, families. People who run. I slipped my hand across the photos, like touching an open wound. A hot wave rose in my chest and burned my throat. I didn't know if it was sorrow, or rage, or grief, because suddenly I realized I was mourning a life I thought I had, but never truly did. I closed my eyes. I remembered the work trips, the rushed gifts, the repeated excuses, the nights he mumbled names I didn't know while he slept, names I ignored, because I believed he was just a tired man dreaming nonsense. But now, I understood. Those were leaks from the life he tried to bury. Selena? The voice didn't come from memory. It came from the yard. I opened my eyes quickly, startled. I stood, still clutching the photos, and walked to the window. It was her, Dana, the woman from the grocery store. She stood at the gate with an expression mixing exhaustion and quiet urgency. When our eyes met, she lifted an envelope. Another one. My legs tingled. She gave a small gesture, a tiny nod, and mouthed something I understood even from far away. There's more. And before I could open the door, she walked off, disappearing down the street. I looked down at the photos scattered across the floor, and a certainty rose inside me, deep, old, and merciless. I wasn't uncovering a betrayal. I was uncovering an identity, or rather, the absence of one. And in that moment, I realized something even more devastating. His biggest lie wasn't in the past. His biggest lie was in my life, and I was only beginning it. I thought nothing could still surprise me after the photos, the boy with the birthmark, the woman who showed up at my door holding an envelope that felt heavier than a body. But I was wrong. The first real shock didn't come from a memory or an old document. It came from a place no one should fear: a hospital. It started with something simple, a routine exam. I'd been feeling dizzy, exhausted. Age does its work, worries pile up, and we learn to push things aside. But after a few weeks, waking up with my body dragging and my head spinning, I finally scheduled an appointment. When I casually mentioned it in the kitchen while chopping vegetables, I wasn't expecting anything. I was just telling him which day I'd be gone. But the moment I said the word hospital, his whole body reacted. Hospital? He repeated, as if I'd suggested a trip to another planet. Why all that, Selena? You're fine. I froze mid-slice. The vegetables left half cut on the board. I'm not that fine, Desmond. I just want to check. He set his glass down in the sink with unnecessary force. The sound echoed through the kitchen. Nowadays, they invent illnesses where there are none. You know how it is. They ask for tests for everything, collect your data, cross information. It's invasive. They collect your data? He didn't sound worried about my body. He sounded worried about my paperwork. That thought echoed inside me. I could have swallowed it, like so many times before, but my patience for his exaggerated reactions was wearing thin. Still, I didn't push. I already knew his pattern. Every time I insisted on something that touched his silent fear, he built a wall. So I said, "It's just a checkup. It's not about them, it's about me." He stared at me for a few seconds, calculating how much he could forbid without revealing his control. Then he sighed. "Do whatever you want. Just don't forget the right documents. Those things are always a hassle." It sounded strange, but I let it go. On the day of the appointment, he insisted on coming with me, said it was out of care. But the way he gripped the steering wheel, his hands rigid, his eyes locked on the road, that wasn't a worried husband. That was someone entering a minefield. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and cold air. The harsh lights washed everyone pale. I felt a small flutter of nerves. Medical tests do that. But what unsettled me wasn't my anxiety. It was his. He walked too fast through the halls, avoided looking at signs, doors, plaques, as if afraid a wall would recognize him. We reached reception. The clerk smiled and asked for my documents. ID, insurance card, and a document for your companion, please. I gathered my things calmly. When I looked at him, he was frozen. His hand touched his wallet but didn't move. "Sir," the clerk repeated, "your ID as well, please." He took out his wallet slowly, like he was removing something forbidden. He pulled out a card, put it back, changed it, hesitated. I'd never seen him confused over something so simple. When he finally handed it over, I noticed the tips of his fingers were damp with sweat. The clerk typed, frowned slightly at the screen. "The system's a little slow today, sorry." He shifted in his chair. His knee bounced rapidly, his eyes scanning the room like looking for an escape route. I watched him, and one thought pulsed through my mind. This isn't normal. When they called me for blood work, he insisted on walking me to the door, something he never did because he always said he hated needles. But that day, his fear was focused elsewhere. The nurse checked my info, glanced at his file too. "You've been here before, right?" she said casually, looking at the monitor. That's when I saw it. His entire body stiffened. "No," he answered too quickly. "First time." The nurse frowned. "That's odd. I swear I've seen this face. But the last name?" She stopped mid-sentence, like she'd said too much. Gave a polite, awkward smile. Must be my mistake. It wasn't. I knew it. He knew it. My heart began racing. I looked at him. He didn't look back. His jaw was tight, fingers gripping the chair, foot tapping the floor. I was watching a man in panic. Not emotional panic, administrative panic. He wasn't afraid of illness. He was afraid of record. On the drive home, the silence was heavier than the car itself. Until he exploded. "You heard what that nurse said?" I did. "Incompetent people, mixing up patients. It's absurd." "She only said she thought she'd seen you before under another last name," I replied, unable to hold it in. His grip tightened so hard his knuckles turned white. "She didn't say that," he shot back quickly. I looked at him from the side. Sweat dripped down his face despite the AC. "She did." He took a deep breath, like someone pulling back a piece of himself that was about to slip out. "You're being sensitive, Selena, hearing things that aren't there." He only said that when the things were absolutely there. Back home, while he showered, I went to the drawer where we kept documents and insurance cards. I pulled out some papers, and there it was. An old clinic receipt, another hospital, another city. His name printed with another last name. It wasn't a typo. It was the last name from the receipt, the last name from the photos, the last name from his other life. A chill ran down my spine. I grabbed my phone and searched his other full name. Among forgotten links, old articles, blogs, I found a short note tucked away, dated 15 years ago. A closed police case. No details, just a mention. Suspect not located. Possible records in other cities. Identity change under investigation. Case closed due to insufficient evidence. And there, in the middle of the text, the name. The name on the receipt. The name the nurse almost recognized. The name he buried. My blood went cold. Suddenly, everything clicked. The trips, the fear of hospitals, the irritation with documents, the locked cabinet, the boy in the photos, the missing woman, the mother he claimed was dead. He wasn't just a man with emotional secrets. I was married to someone afraid of his own legal existence. Someone who knew a single document could light up his past. And one question sliced through my mind like a blade. Who sleeps beside me? A scared husband? Or a man hiding from something far bigger than me? I closed the drawer slowly, listening to the water running upstairs. Water falling, his body moving, my life swirling down the drain with the foam. I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If I confronted him now, openly, I wouldn't just risk hearing the truth. I might get erased along with it. So I made a silent choice. I wasn't going to strike. I was going to surround him. But to do that, I'd have to go deeper, open more drawers, more files, more memories, and face the terror whispering in my chest. What if he wasn't just a liar? What if he was dangerous? Right there, caught between fear and clarity, my life split in two, before the hospital and after the hospital. And from that moment on, every step I took had to be calculated, because I wasn't just trying to understand who he was, I was trying to survive long enough to find out. After the hospital, nothing in my body returned to normal. It felt like I'd left a piece of my innocence in that corridor, right when I saw his face freeze at a nurse simply doing her job. I knew something serious was happening, but I didn't know how big it was. And knowing a monster exists without knowing its size is perhaps the greatest terror of all. That night, when we got home, he went straight to the office. He didn't kiss my head, didn't ask about my exam, didn't mention dinner. He just locked the door behind him, and the sound of that lock echoed inside me like a sentence. He never locked that door. Never. It was as if, after the hospital, he realized he needed stronger walls around his secrets. And I realized I needed to break through them. I waited until I heard the click of his office chair, the typing, the familiar shuffle of papers. I knew he was reviewing documents, not because he needed to, but because he was scared. Scared he'd left a loose thread. Scared I'd seen too much. Meanwhile, I stayed in the kitchen, chopping vegetables I didn't even plan to cook. Each piece hitting the cutting board felt like a thought breaking inside me. Then I remembered the photos. The child with the birthmark. The woman who seemed to know the smile he never gave me. The small house. The receipt with another name. And Dana's words. His family that never existed. The sentence I had tried to ignore now hit my chest like a ticking clock. I needed confirmation. I waited for him to fall asleep. Or rather, I waited for the murmuring to begin. The heavy breaths, the incomplete names, the fragments of sentences I once thought were dreams, but now understood as leaks of his real life. When the third murmur came, I slid quietly out of bed, feeling the cold floor under my feet. I went to the kitchen. Streetlight poured through the window, dim, but enough to see without switching anything on. I opened the drawer where he kept tools, and there it was, a metal box, heavy, old, smelling of rust. He always told me not to touch it because it held dangerous things. In that moment, I understood the danger wasn't the box. It was the man who owned it. I pulled the box out and set it on the table. When I opened it, I found exactly what I didn't want to find, but needed to see. Letters. Old letters, yellowed at the edges, with a scent that mixed dust, cheap perfume, and pain. The first one showed the sender, Agatha Marlowe, his mother, the mother he claimed was dead. My hands trembled, my stomach churned. I opened the first letter slowly, like touching a wound. Son, please come home. I'm worried. You don't have to run like this. You don't need to erase everything. I'm here. I always will be. My breath caught. Run. Erase. Come home. The next letters were even worse. Son, I don't understand what's happening. You said everything was fine. Why did you change your name? Why did you cut contact? Why did you tell people I died? A tear fell onto the paper. He had killed his own mother to the world, not with his hands, but with a story, a narrative death. And in some ways, that was even worse. It was a perfect erasure. No body, no proof, no guilt. I looked around the kitchen as if the whole house had changed shape. And it had, because it was no longer a home. It was his hiding place. I opened another letter. I don't know what you did, but I forgive you. I just want my son back. I stopped, closed my eyes. My heart felt so heavy it pulled my shoulders down. I didn't know what he had done, but his mother did. Dana did. Russell did. I was the only one who didn't know, because I had been chosen precisely for that. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a silent witness. A woman who could trust. A woman like me. I closed the box gently, but before putting it away, I found something in the bottom. A certificate. Not ours. Another marriage certificate. With another woman. The same woman from the photos. My legs nearly gave out, and I had to hold on to the table. Air left my lungs. The floor felt like it was moving under me. He had been married before, and he never told me. And on the back of that certificate was a section, Current Status of Spouse, Missing. I stepped back like I'd been slapped. Missing. The word burned in my mind. I closed the box, put everything back in the drawer, and inhaled deeply. Not to calm down, but to prepare. Because in that moment, something I hadn't felt in years came alive inside me. Clarity. I knew I was dealing with a man capable of erasing people, symbolically or literally. I also knew confronting him too soon would be signing my own sentence. So I did what women who are broken but intelligent learn to do. I made a plan. Silently. It was simple. A. Gather evidence. B. Maintain the appearance of normalcy. C. Don't let him know what I'd discovered. D. Find someone who could support me. E. Wait for the exact moment to expose the truth. F. And survive until then. I closed the drawer, left the kitchen, walked upstairs slowly. When I reached the bedroom door, he murmured my name in his sleep. But it wasn't a call. It was a warning. Selena, don't look. My blood turned to ice because I was looking and I wasn't going to stop. In that moment, I understood. I was no longer a confused wife. I was a woman in a silent war. A war he didn't know had already begun. I thought I already understood the weight of everything. His mother, he declared, dead. The ex-wife listed as missing. The letters begging him to come home. The hidden certificate. The hospital panic. The false surname. But there was something I still hadn't connected. The dreams. Or rather, what I thought were dreams. For years, I'd heard my husband talk in his sleep. At first, I found it funny. Who doesn't mumble nonsense at night? After a while, I stopped paying attention. He muttered names, broken words, fragments that meant nothing to me. Don't go back there. Don't tell her. Nobody needs to know. Brooke, Dale. And like every woman carrying the weight of the world, I was too tired to turn those into problems. I'd roll over, adjust my pillow, and think, just dreams. But now I knew they weren't dreams. They were confessions. Trauma leaks. I'd read that once somewhere and never thought about it again. But suddenly, everything clicked. Sometimes the body speaks what the mouth refuses to. His body had been speaking to me for years. I just didn't speak the language until the day the stranger translated it for me. Our meeting happened in a small cafe in Brookdale. Yes, exactly the name I'd heard him whisper in his sleep. The neighborhood, the corner, the faded shop sign, it all felt like a place he had known better than he ever admitted. When I arrived, Dana was already there, hands folded on the table, eyes fixed on a spot, as if she'd rehearsed this scene countless times before living it for real. I sat across from her. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with her soft citrus perfume made my chest tighten. I wanted to cry for no reason. Maybe because, for the first time, I felt like I was stepping into a part of his life he didn't control. "Thank you for coming," she said. I just nodded. Words felt too heavy. She looked straight into my eyes and said the first thing that broke something inside me. "Does he still talk in his sleep?" The air between us split. My heart stopped for a second. "How do you know that?" I asked, my voice lower than I intended. She gave a sad, knowing smile. "Because he always says the same things. He did it with me too, and with the woman before me as well." My stomach twisted. "You know what he says?" Dana took a slow breath, leaning forward slightly. "Don't go back there. Don't tell her. Nobody needs to know. Brookdale, don't talk about Agatha." A wave of chills rolled across my whole body, not just because she knew, but because she repeated them exactly as I had heard them. "Once," she continued, "he came to me desperate, saying his past had to stay dead, that if certain things came up again, everything he'd built would collapse. He begged me, almost crying, to forget what I knew, to never mention certain words if I ever met another woman in his life." "Another woman?" I repeated it, tasting the bitterness of it. Dana nodded. "He always knew he wouldn't stop with me. He lives in versions. And you were the version he believed would be easiest to keep in the dark." That hurt in a way I cannot describe, because it wasn't just betrayal, it was design. I wasn't deceived by accident. I was selected for my ability to trust. "And the woman before you?" I asked. Dana swallowed hard. She just disappeared. That word again. Disappeared. I sat straighter, feeling the chair press against my spine. She pulled out another envelope. Before she vanished, she tried opening a case against him. Here. She pushed papers toward me, part of a deposition. His name wasn't fully listed, but the pattern appeared again. Possible alias use, identity change, flight history. The case dismissed for lack of evidence, lack of witnesses, lack of body. The paper smelled old, damp, unjust. "Listen to me carefully, Selena," she said, leaning closer, as if she were speaking directly to my soul. "He doesn't love deeply. Not me, not you, not the woman before. He loves function. He loves structure. He loves what people do for him. But us, as people?" She shook her head. "We're just part of the version he's playing in each new city." That was the first twist that shattered me. I wasn't just a betrayed wife. I was a character cast for his storyline. "So what was I to him?" I asked, throat tight. She didn't blink. "You were the one who doesn't ask too many questions. the one who trusts, the one who keeps the house running, the one who organizes documents, the one who provides an alibi. He always said he needed a woman like that for a new life. The new life. I was his new life, built directly on top of the corpse of the old one, still unburied. When I left that cafe, my bag felt heavier than when I'd arrived. Not because of the envelope, because of everything I now knew. For the first time since everything began, I didn't walk into my home wondering, what will he think of me? But instead, what will I do with what I know? My plan had been to survive and understand. Now the plan changed shape. I didn't just want to get out of the story. I wanted to rewrite its ending. Carefully, safely, intelligently. Over the next days, I acted like nothing had happened. Same routine, breakfast prepared, house tidy, light conversations. But inside, I had a full timeline mapped out. While he pretended to control everything, I pieced together photos, letters, certificates, notes of his sleep talk, Dana's story, Agatha's words, the hospital slip, the years of subtle discomfort I ignored. Then I did something that changed everything. I sought professional help, a family attorney. I brought everything, spread it across her desk. My heart ached, but my hands were steady. She listened without interrupting. At the end, she said, "You're not crazy, you're awake." She explained what I already feared. The man I lived with wasn't just a liar. He was someone who understood documentation, identity shifts, narrative construction, someone who could harm me socially or legally if confronted. "You must handle this protected," she said. "Gather evidence, formalize things, record conversations when possible, and above all, don't reveal how much you know until you're safe." I walked out with something new, structured strategy, not just intuition. That night, I decided it would mark the beginning of the end, not of my life, but of his lie. I waited for him to sleep, waited for the murmurs to begin. This time, I didn't turn away. I grabbed my phone, silenced every alert, and hit record. I laid beside him, pretending to sleep, listening to his voice coming from a place he couldn't control, a voice soaked in fear. "Don't go back. Don't go back there. Don't tell her. She can't know. Brookdale, Agatha is gone. Don't say Agatha." Every word felt like a drop of truth leaking from him. When the recording ended, I knew I had what I needed. His body spoke a language. His waking voice refused. And now, I understood the dialect. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked him in the eyes. I prepared breakfast, set the table. Everything appeared perfect, the life he thought he still controlled. When he sat down, instead of small talk, I set an envelope on the table. He frowned. "What's that?" I watched him. The way he held his toast, the way he poured his coffee, the way he avoided my eyes. And I said, with a calm I didn't know I had, "It's your life, the real one." He chuckled, that short, dismissive laugh he used whenever he wanted me to doubt myself. "Selena, come on." I opened the envelope, spread everything across the table. A photo of him with his ex-wife, the old marriage certificate, a letter from his mother, the hospital document with the other surname, the printed police case, and finally, my phone with the recording open. He said nothing. And that's when the second twist happened. I expected yelling, denial, maybe even threats. But instead, he smiled. A slow, cold smile I had never seen before. "So you finally decided to play detective." His voice, that tone, scared me more than any outburst. "I'm not playing," I said. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And what exactly do you think you'll do with all this? Selena, who will you tell? I held his stare. Someone who doesn't think I'm crazy. His eyes narrowed. You have nothing. I slid the phone toward him, pressed play. His own voice filled the kitchen. He went pale. For the first time, something cracked. He reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. Too late, I said softly. And I didn't mean this phone. I meant too late to rewrite the past. Too late to control the story. Too late to keep me silent. He took a slow breath, the kind designed to reset control. You're sick, Selena. Recording your own husband while he sleeps? That's not normal. Sick is the man who builds a life on lies. For the first time, he flinched. And I saw it. The real fear. Not fear of nurses or documents or memories. Fear of me. Because for the first time since he met me, I was no longer an accessory to his version. I was the ending. I leaned in. You chose me because you thought I wouldn't ask questions, because I trusted you, because I would cook, clean, sign where you told me to, and keep quiet. You picked me for my silence. I paused. But you forgot one thing. He swallowed. What? I gave a sad, firm smile. Women who trust too much, when they wake up, never go back to sleep. He opened his mouth to speak, but I lifted my hand. It's over. I've already talked to an attorney. She has everything. I know about your mom, your ex-wife, the woman before her. You don't control the narrative anymore. Not here, not anywhere. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of his collapse. He looked at me with a kind of hatred he'd never shown. But hatred no longer intimidated me. Because in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I no longer feared what he could do to me. I knew what I could do for myself. I stood, gathered the folder with all the copies, and walked toward the door. I felt his stare burning my back, but I kept going. Before stepping out, I said, without turning around, I don't know what you did before you walked into my life, but I know what you won't do from today on. Silence me. And I left. The air outside hit my face like a late baptism. I was shaking, but not with fear, with freedom. For the first time since everything began, I knew revenge wouldn't be him suffering. Revenge would be me living. And one question pulsed quietly inside me. What happens when he realizes, this time, the story didn't end with the woman disappearing? I was about to find out. I thought that after that breakfast, the confrontation, the recording, the photos spread across the table like shards of a mirror that would never reflect the same face again, he would yell, threaten, try to contain the damage. But he didn't. His silence was far worse. His silence was strategy, calculation, fear disguised as calm. And for 2 days, the house turned into a minefield where every step felt like it might trigger an emotional explosion. He watched me in silence. I could feel the weight of his stare on my back while I washed dishes, adjusted the couch pillows, closed the curtains. It was as if he were trying to predict my next move, but he couldn't. Because for the first time since he entered my life, I had a space inside me that was mine, and he had no map for it. 2 days later, it happened, the collapse. Not loud, not dramatic, but subtle, humiliating for him and liberating for me. We were standing in line at the pharmacy. I held a medication for my dizziness. He held nothing, just accompanying me as if he still played the part of a husband, as if he still belonged in my routine. When it was our turn, the clerk asked, "Full name for the register, please?" I answered automatically, "Selena Bradford." She typed it. Then she looked at him. "And yours, sir?" And that was it. That exact moment, the second his world split. For a brief moment, only a second, he hesitated. His eyes unfocused. His breath faltered. His lips parted, but no sound came out. It was like watching a man trip on his own story, because he didn't know which name was safe to say. A chill ran through me, not from fear, from confirmation. The clerk repeated, thinking he hadn't heard, "Your full name, sir?" Finally, he spoke, voice rough, forced. "Desmond Marlowe." He almost said the other one, almost said the real one, almost revealed the name he had buried under layers of lies. And the moment he realized he'd nearly exposed himself, he looked at me. In that look, for the first time, I saw genuine panic. Not the panic of a man afraid of losing a wife. Not the panic of someone afraid of being discovered. A far deeper panic. The panic of losing control. He was no longer the narrator of the story. I had become the living proof of the version he tried to erase. We drove home without saying a word. Once inside, he shut the door harder than necessary. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. I turned to face him. The afternoon light lit only half his face, leaving the other half in shadow. A perfect metaphor for who he was, split between identities, versions, masks. "My truth and my freedom," I answered. He laughed. A nervous, almost childish laugh, like someone losing a game they always believed they could rig. "Freedom? You think you can handle all this alone? Who's going to believe you?" I took a slow breath. "A lawyer, a witness, documents, photos, letters, the hospital record, the recording of your voice. Want me to keep going?" His face drained of color. He never imagined I'd be capable of this. And in that moment, something inside me aligned. The woman he chose to be submissive no longer existed. He rushed to the office, probably to check the documents he'd hidden, or maybe to see what he still had power over. I followed, not to stop him, but to witness. He pulled open the usual drawers. Empty. The drawer with the false IDs. Empty. The little safe with spare keys. Empty. The black folder with official seals. Empty. I had already copied everything. He stood in the center of the office, breathing fast, staring at the drawers as if I had pulled the floor out from beneath him. And that's exactly what I had done. "It's no use running," I said calmly. "Everything is already with my attorney." He turned to me, his eyes red with anger. "You destroyed my life." The sentence landed inside me like a rock falling into a lake, forming ripples but unable to drown me. "No," I replied. "You destroyed your life when you decided I'd be part of a lie. I just removed the rug." He took one step toward me. I stepped one back, not out of fear, but out of boundary. "I can ruin you," he whispered. "You already tried." He froze. "And you failed." That last sentence hit him. He didn't speak again. He shrank in a way I never imagined I'd see. That night, he packed his things. No words, no slammed doors, no theatrics. He simply left. And when I heard his car turn the corner, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. My chest was light. My body was free. My heart was my own again. I sat on the living room floor and cried. Not for the end of the marriage, not for the lies, but for the woman who, between ruins, managed to stand up and breathe again. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, internal, steady, perfect. And I slept alone that night, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. When I woke up the morning after he left, it took me a few seconds to understand what felt different: the silence. But it wasn't the oppressive silence that used to whisper, "Watch what you ask." No, this was a new silence, clean, breathable, a silence that felt like the house had finally exhaled after holding its breath for years. I stayed in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of nothing. And for the first time, that nothing didn't scare me. It comforted me. I walked downstairs slowly, feeling like my footsteps belonged to that floor for the first time ever. I made coffee just for myself. The warm cup in my hands made me feel alive. Alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I sat at the table and looked around. Same kitchen, same window, same blue curtains with their tiny white embroidery. But the person seeing them now was different. And then everything made sense. He wasn't the stranger. I was. I was the stranger in my own life. The stranger in a story he wrote alone. The stranger in his silences. The stranger in the routines he controlled. The stranger behind doors I was never allowed to open. I lived beside a man who only let me exist on the surface. And in truth, I had never been part of his life. Men like him don't want love. They want control. And control only exists when the other person knows less. I didn't know his world because he never intended for me to belong in it. And as painful as that was, it came with a quiet liberation. If I was never part of his life, then he never took mine away. My life was still here, soft, waiting for its first real breath. In the weeks that followed, I reorganized everything. I reorganized the house. I reorganized my documents. I reorganized the silence inside me. I donated old clothes, washed the curtains, moved furniture, threw out objects that carried his energy. Every action was a line erased from the story he tried to force on me. My attorney called as the case moved forward. His investigation began, officially, and for the first time, someone besides me was asking the right questions. I felt protected, seen, grounded, and strangely, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. Because once his lie fell apart, I discovered a truth about myself. I never needed him to exist. He needed my silence to survive. And that silence was finally gone. As months passed, something even deeper settled inside me. I didn't just gain my freedom, I gained my voice. A voice that had been muffled for years under the weight of blind trust, exhausting routine, emotional invisibility. Now that voice was clear, firm, mine. And with that voice, I told myself something I had never dared to say before. I will never shrink myself to fit inside someone else's story again. That became my anchor, my rebirth, my pact with myself. And that's what I want every woman who hears my story to carry in her heart. You weren't naive. You were loyal. You were loving. You were strong in the wrong places. But now you can be strong in the right ones. And if someone ever tried to erase you, remember, the light you lost was theirs. The light you reclaim is yours alone. Today, I walk with my head high, not because I defeated a man, but because I defeated the version of myself who believed she had to earn love to deserve respect. I rewrote my story, and in a way, I rewrote myself. And if you've stayed with me until the end, I want to leave you with the sentence that saved my soul. I didn't lose him. I recovered myself. If this story touched you, leave your like, your comment, and share it with someone who needs to wake up too. Your voice matters here, and your life matters even more.